candle never asks the darkness for permission to shine. It just does, and the shadows scatter in panic. Welcome, chosen ones. There's something you need to hear, and not tomorrow, not someday. Now, because while you've been trying to stay peaceful, they've been planning how to twist your peace into a problem. Let's make it clear, not every side-eye was harmless. Not every silence was empty. Some people weren't clapping for you. They were loading their envy into fake smiles and waiting for the moment to strike. You didn't walk into a room and create conflict. Your energy revealed it. You're not the problem. You're the mirror that made them see what they hate in themselves. Before we go further, like and subscribe to help spread this message to more chosen ones. Every like, every share tells YouTube this message matters. It's how we break the silence, and it's how we reach those who feel like they're walking alone with a light they don't yet understand. Let's talk about the war you didn't start, but somehow became the center of. You were marked by the universe, not marked for pain, but for purpose. That mark glows. It doesn't fade. And those who live in the shadows, they see it, they feel it, and it haunts them. They tried to laugh at you, tried to leave you out, gossiped behind your back, stared you down, and told others you're too much. But what they really meant was, you're too powerful to control. You walk into spaces and make people question the lies they've built their egos on. You didn't threaten them with words. You threatened them by existing. Let me ask you this. Have you ever seen a lion apologize for its roar? Have you ever seen fire ask permission before it burns? Exactly. Then why are you still questioning your light? They weren't confused. They were convicted. Your presence dug up feelings they buried years ago. Secret jealousy, unspoken love, admiration dressed up as hate. And when emotions get locked away too long, they don't die, they mutate. That clash, that blow-up, that eruption, it wasn't random. It was years of feelings finally losing their chains. And you were the final trigger. But here's the part they'll never say out loud. They wished they were chosen too. They wished the universe had marked them. But instead, it picked you. And while you're out here doubting yourself, thinking you're alone, they're out here secretly watching, obsessing, trying to figure out how you keep rising. You think you're walking unnoticed. They've been keeping tabs. You think your story doesn't matter. It's already being whispered in rooms you've never entered. So why do you still walk like you're ordinary? Why are you treating your gift like it's a burden? Stop apologizing for what the universe placed in you. You're not arrogant, you're aware. You're not dramatic, you're different. They weren't just fighting you. They were fighting everything you represent. Your light, your calling, your ability to break cycles and still smile. You're living proof that their excuses aren't valid, that healing is real, that greatness can come from the overlooked, and that terrifies them. So from now on, walk like you've been chosen. Speak like the universe stands behind you, because it does. The war was never about you being wrong. It was about you being right in a world that hates correction. Stay lit, stay bold. And remember, you're not the spark. You're the whole fire. Are you ready for the rest of the message? So if you've ever felt the sting of silent envy, the weight of unspoken tension, or the clash that seemed to come out of nowhere, you're not imagining it. This message found you for a reason. Drop the number 77 in the comments if you're done apologizing for the chaos your light reveals. Every chosen one feels the pull when truth hits home. And if you've read this far, that's not a coincidence. It's alignment. And now, let's break it down step by step. Because once you understand why the clash happened, you'll never doubt your power again. Let's begin. Number 1. They clapped in public, but plotted in silence. When praise turns poison. They never hated your light. They hated the way it revealed their shadows. Some people don't want you dimmed. They want you extinguished. Let's cut through the sugar. This wasn't admiration gone sour. This was sabotage dressed in politeness, jealousy wearing a friendly face. They saw you rise, and it killed them. Not because you took something from them, but because your existence exposed their excuses. You weren't trying to prove anything. You were just being you, bold, lit from within, chosen. And that's what shattered them. You walked in with purpose while they were still trying to fake passion. You owned your scars while they buried theirs in silence. You had the nerve to show up glowing when they were still hiding under the weight of their own fear. Don't think for 1 second it was ever just envy. No. This was something darker, something personal. They didn't just envy your success. They resented your courage. Every step you took forward was a mirror to their stagnation. Every time you spoke truth, it was a slap to their well-maintained delusions. You weren't a rival. You were a reality check they never asked for. At first, they admired you, secretly, quietly, behind closed doors. They watched, studied, obsessed. You lit a fire in them, but instead of using it to fuel growth, they let it turn to smoke and spite. They didn't want to cheer for you because clapping would mean they had to confront their own inaction. So they chose sabotage, passive-aggressive comments, withholding support, undermining you in rooms you didn't even know you were being mentioned in. They figured if they couldn't match your light, they'd try to kill the switch. But here's the cosmic joke. You are wired directly to the universe itself. The power that chose you is not a light bulb. It's the sun. And you started to doubt. You looked at their silence and mistook it for your failure. You questioned your shine because they wore masks too well. Stop that, right now. The universe doesn't pick favorites by accident. You weren't lucky, you were aligned. When you're chosen, the entire fabric of existence rearranges itself to push you forward. Timing shifts, people show up, doors open, and yes, enemies react. Why? Because they realized they were playing games with a system they didn't build and can't beat. You've got to understand this. They were never fighting you. They were swinging at the force that sent you. You became the battlefield because your presence interrupted their comfort zone. That eruption, that clash, it was spiritual recoil. Your energy broke their illusion. You didn't ask for a fight, but your frequency declared war on their lies. And now you wonder, why me? Why the isolation? Why the attacks? Why the sudden change in how they look at you? Because when you're chosen, you're no longer one of them. You're set apart. You carry a light that can't be hidden, and that light exposes the rot. Others are trying to pretend isn't there. You stopped fitting in, not because something's wrong with you, but because your growth outgrew their grip. Let's stop playing humble about it. You've been marked. There is something in you that terrifies people who've given up on themselves. So they act out, they betray, they lash. Not because you're too much, but because you're everything they convinced themselves they couldn't be. Let this be your wake-up call. You were never meant to make everyone comfortable. Chosen ones disturb the comfortable and comfort the disturbed. That's your role. That's your weight. And yes, that's your weapon. They clapped in public, but they plotted in silence. They smiled, but they were scanning for your weak spots. They called you too confident because they felt exposed standing next to someone so sure. But let them stare. Let them gossip. Let them plot. Because while they were busy trying to pull you down, the universe was busy lifting you anyway. You weren't sent to blend in. You were sent to break patterns. You're not just a person. You are a reckoning. And anyone who tried to dim that, they didn't just lose access to you. They lost alignment with everything that was about to bless you. You've been chosen. Stop acting like you weren't. And next time you feel alone, remember, even when it's quiet, the universe is still moving mountains in your favor. Number 2, you didn't break them. Your presence broke the illusion they worshipped. They didn't fall out with you. They fell out with the lie they were living. You were just the mirror. Let's be brutally honest. You didn't do anything to them. You didn't attack, manipulate, compete, or expose anyone. All you did was show up, unapologetically, authentically, fully you. And that alone ripped the mask clean off. You didn't enter their lives like a storm. You entered like a sunrise, quiet, brilliant, inevitable. And yet, it shook them to their core. Why? Because your presence destroyed the illusion they were clinging to, like a lifeline. They told themselves they were doing fine. They called settling peace. They dressed up fear and played it off as humility. They shrank and said it was maturity. But then you walked in, full of light, flaws, fire, and freedom. And suddenly, their script didn't make sense anymore. You were living proof that the story they sold themselves wasn't truth. It was survival. And nothing enrages the insecure more than watching someone live in the space they buried their dreams in. They watched you take risks while they chose safety. They saw you speak loudly while they kept quiet. You chased purpose. They clung to routine. And when you thrived in that purpose, they snapped. Not because you were wrong, but because you were right, and your very existence called them out without saying a word. Let's be clear, you never had to raise your voice. Your light raised the stakes. You weren't even thinking about them, but they were thinking about you, obsessively, because suddenly they had to confront the possibility that they could have been more, if they hadn't settled. You didn't threaten their position. You threatened their delusion, and that's why they turned on you. That's why they created space, stirred up drama, distanced themselves under fake pretenses. Not because you hurt them, but because you exposed that they never truly healed. You were like spiritual ammonia. You didn't intend to burn, but you cleaned the air. You didn't throw anything in their face. Your very being revealed what they'd been trying to hide. Their stagnation, their regret, their untapped potential. They weren't ready for someone like you. Someone who didn't just talk change, but embodied it. Someone who didn't play roles to be accepted. Someone who carried light without needing permission. And what did they do with that discomfort? Did they grow? Did they self-reflect? Did they rise to meet you? No. They retreated. They got petty. They labeled you as too intense, too much, too loud, too deep. But that was never about you. That was a smokescreen. They needed a villain to feel safe in their victimhood. And so, They cast you as the enemy in a story that only ever needed a hero. Here's what they'll never say out loud. They loved you. Maybe not romantically, but spiritually, energetically, they were drawn to you. You lit something in them they hadn't felt in years. Hope, fire, restlessness. But love, true love, even in friendships, requires transformation. And that's where they backed out. Because loving you meant growing. Loving you meant facing themselves. Loving you meant leaving comfort behind. And they weren't ready for that. So instead of rising, they retreated. Instead of evolving, they escaped. Instead of confessing their fear, they camouflaged it as anger. They didn't hate you because you changed. They hated you because they didn't. And here's where I need you to wake up, chosen one. You keep internalizing their reactions like they're proof something's wrong with you. Like maybe if you were softer, quieter, less intense, they would have stayed. But they didn't leave because you failed. They left because they refused to face themselves in your presence. And you've got to stop shrinking out of guilt. You've got to stop editing your spirit just to fit in cages they built for themselves. You were sent to disrupt. You were sent to unravel false peace. You were sent to raise the vibration. So let them talk. Let them lie. Let them twist the narrative. Because while they're busy telling stories to justify their smallness, you're out here being the proof that healing is real, that growth is possible, that evolution hurts but works. You don't owe them an explanation for existing. You don't owe them comfort when your very essence is transformation. And you certainly don't owe them your silence to protect the lie they refuse to leave. Understand this. Your presence was the test they weren't ready for. Your spirit was the light they didn't study for. You didn't fail them. They failed themselves. So when they distance themselves, let them. When they slander, smile. When they misunderstand you, stay focused. Because the universe didn't send you here to win popularity contests. It sent you here to pull back veils. Some people pray for clarity and then hate the person that delivers it. You are that person. You are that clarity. Stop letting their fear become your hesitation. Stop letting their silence make you second-guess your voice. You are chosen, and being chosen means you will shake things up. It means your very existence will stir spirits, reveal truth, cause eruptions. But eruptions aren't destruction, they're awakening. And if your presence causes an earthquake in someone else's false reality, don't apologize. Stand in it. Own it. Because the universe is not neutral about you. It stands behind you. And the ones who couldn't face themselves in your light. They didn't lose you. They lost the last chance they had to evolve. You didn't just enter the room. You changed the room. And that is the weight and the wonder of being chosen. Number 3, they wanted your light, but not its heat. The idea of you was easier than the truth. They didn't fall out of love with you. They fell out of love with the work it takes to stand next to someone like you. Let's cut through the fantasy. They didn't love you. They loved the idea of you. The soft version, the filtered version, the safe, distant, inspirational illusion of you. The one they could observe from afar, applaud when convenient, and place neatly into a box that didn't disturb their comfort zone. But the real you, the one who challenges by simply existing, the one who calls out passivity just by moving forward. That version terrified them. You weren't just someone they liked. You were someone who activated them. You were a walking mirror that said, "Here's what you could be, if you had the courage." And let's be honest, most people don't want that. They want comfort, not change. They want closeness without responsibility. They want love that doesn't ask them to grow. So they loved the idea of you, the aesthetic of you, the motivation post version, the look at how strong they are version, the version that made them feel good without demanding anything back. But once they saw the real you, messy, raw, powerful, non-negotiable, they backed away. Because the real you didn't just inspire, the real you required. Your presence came with a price, growth. And growth hurts. You asked questions that made them uncomfortable. You broke cycles they were still clinging to. You embodied the very courage they swore they wanted, until they had to face it in real time. Because let's tell the truth. Being around someone chosen means being around intensity, depth, truth, and accountability. It means no more games, no more pretending, no more playing small just to keep everyone else from feeling insecure. It means rising or falling behind. And most people don't rise, they retreat. They said you were too much. But what they really meant was, "I'm not enough to stand beside you right now." They said you changed. But what they really meant was, you evolved past the version of me I was comfortable being. You made their stillness feel like surrender. You made their excuses feel like chains. You made their comfort zone feel like cowardice. So they created space, not because you were wrong, but because you were right, and that truth was unbearable. And here's the part that cuts the deepest. They didn't stop loving you. They just didn't love you enough to become who you needed them to be. They loved the version of you that smiled through pain. They loved the version of you that didn't speak up. They loved the version that dimmed your light so they wouldn't have to squint. But the moment you stopped shrinking, they started running. Because love without growth is fantasy. And fantasy doesn't survive the real thing. And I know what you're thinking. If they loved me, why did they leave? If they cared, why couldn't they show up when it mattered? Because showing up costs something. And most people love until it costs them their comfort. They love until it costs them their ego. They love until it costs them their excuses. And then they disappear. Not because the love is gone, but because their capacity was never built to handle someone like you. And no, that's not your fault. That's their decision. That's their limitation. That's their refusal to rise. You didn't scare them because you were too intense. You scared them because you were too real. You held a mirror to their potential and said, "This is what's possible." And instead of stepping into that possibility, they stepped away from you. So what now? You mourn, but don't minimize. You cry, but don't conform. You feel the loss, but don't you dare forget who you are. You were never meant to be a concept. You are not a dream. You are not an idea someone gets to admire from a distance. You are a reality, a reckoning, a living, breathing call to evolution. And if someone can't love you in your fullness, they don't deserve to hold you in any form. You're not asking for too much. You're just not willing to stay small. And the next time someone tries to put your soul in a box they don't intend to grow with, remember, you are not made to be digested in pieces. You are not here to make others feel safe in their stagnation. You are chosen. And the universe didn't pick you to be anyone's idea. It picked you to wake the world up. Let them go. Let them love their fantasy. You'll keep living in the truth. Because the ones who can't handle your light were never meant to walk with your fire. Number 4. They called it conflict, but it was envy in disguise, when admiration turns bitter. They didn't hate you, they hated needing you, and in their pride, admiration rotted into resentment because clapping felt like surrender. Let's not sugarcoat what this really was. They didn't just hide love. They buried admiration beneath layers of sarcasm, passive aggression, fake smiles, and cold stares. They wanted you close, but not too close. Because standing beside you made them feel seen, and not in the way people dream of being seen. In the way that strips them bare, exposes their fears, their stagnation, their smallness. You didn't have to say a word. You simply were. Present, whole, chosen, and that made them feel like less. You chose bravery, they chose delay. You chose healing, they chose hiding. You chose self-respect, they chose cycles. And every move you made, every bold step, every confident no, every unapologetic yes, rubbed salt in wounds they swore didn't exist. But they were bleeding long before you showed up. You just made the pain too loud to ignore. So what did they do? Did they rise with you? Did they thank you for being the example? Did they admit, you inspire me, but I don't know how to meet you where you are? No. They turned their admiration into ammunition, because to them, needing you felt like losing power. Celebrating you felt like conceding defeat. And when a person lacks emotional maturity, they don't admit love. They weaponize it. They start with silent comparisons, then the side eyes, then the gossip, then the gaslighting. They convince themselves that you think you're better because the truth is they think you are, and they can't handle it. Here's the part that hits hardest. They were inspired by you. They watched you closely. They replayed your words. They admired your glow. But instead of owning that admiration, they buried it in bitterness and called you the villain. Why? Because some people would rather destroy the source of their discomfort than confront the reason it's uncomfortable. You didn't hurt them. You triggered them. And instead of asking why the trigger existed, they turned you into the target. They wore pride like armor and let ego run the show. So instead of saying, I miss you, they made jokes behind your back. Instead of saying, you inspire me, they downplayed your success. Instead of saying, I wish I could be more like that, they tried to make you feel like you were too much. You were never the enemy. You were the invitation to grow, to heal, to be more. But invitations require acceptance, and acceptance requires humility. And that's where they choked. Because in their mind, love is weakness, dependence is shameful, and admiration must be kept quiet, or better yet, crushed before it exposes their emotional lack. They didn't just bury their feelings. They built altars to them, monuments of pride, laced with gossip and sarcasm, just to avoid saying the one thing that could have saved it all. I admire you. I need you. But I'm scared. Instead, they burned bridges they still stand at the edge of, quietly hoping you'll come back and rebuild them. But that's not your job. You were never meant to be the emotional janitor cleaning up after those too proud to speak truth. You gave them light. They chose the shadows. You gave them love. They chose silence. You gave them presence. They returned it with pettiness. And yet, they still need you. Still check your page. Still watch your moves. Still replay your last conversation, wondering how they fumbled someone so real. In another life, maybe they would have been ready. But in this one, fear and pride won. Emotion buried too long turns into rot. And now, every word they throw at you is just residue of admiration that curdled into resentment. You didn't lose them. They lost the one person who truly saw them and didn't flinch. They lost the one who could have helped them rise, not because you failed, but because they refused to stand up. So stop wondering what you did wrong. Stop replaying it like maybe if you were just a little quieter, smaller, less bright, they would have stayed. No, they needed to be shaken. And you were the quake. Your light was never the problem. It was the test. And they failed it. Let them sit with what they lost. Let them ache in the silence they created. Because one day they'll remember the way you made them feel, lit up, alive, challenged, and realize they weren't pushed away. They walked. You were never too much. They were just too scared to be enough. Keep rising. Let them choke on the silence they chose over honesty. Let them wrestle with the ghost of their own admiration. You don't bury truth. You become it. And the ones who resent you for it, they were never strong enough to stand beside it in the first place. Number 5. Your peace wasn't passive. It was power, and it threatened their entire existence. When you stopped playing their game, they called you distant. But the truth is, you just stopped bleeding for people who kept handing you the knife. Let's get something straight. Your peace was never weakness. It wasn't silence from fear. It wasn't calm because you didn't care. It was power, raw, earned, and dangerous to anyone still surviving on chaos. You didn't show up to be a savior or a problem. You showed up whole, healed, rooted. And that alone was enough to disrupt everything they thought was working for them. They had made chaos their home, toxic habits their identity, drama their oxygen. And here you came, walking in without flinching, smiling without needing to control anyone, glowing without seeking permission. You didn't play their emotional ping-pong. You didn't take the bait. You didn't yell back, beg, or break. And to someone who only understands attention through dysfunction, your peace felt like a threat. You didn't just disrupt their chaos, you exposed it. Your clarity made their confusion obvious. Your stillness made their noise unbearable. Your grounded energy made their instability stand out like a scream in a church. They wanted you to react, to spiral, to stoop, to show that you were just like them, that your peace was performative, that your healing was fake, that your growth was an illusion. So they tested you, picked at you, lied about you, tried to create storms just to see if you'd drown. But instead of crashing, you rose. Instead of yelling, you breathed. Instead of explaining yourself, you let the silence speak for you. And that, chosen one, is when they knew they lost. Because nothing scares a chaotic soul more than someone who doesn't flinch when the room shakes. You were supposed to fall apart. You were supposed to defend, prove, explode, but you didn't. And that made you dangerous. Your peace wasn't just calm. It was resistance. It was protest against dysfunction. It was rebellion against cycles they weren't ready to leave. You were the mirror they couldn't avoid, and you didn't need to say a word. Your vibe alone screamed, "This isn't healthy. This isn't real. This isn't love." You didn't try to fix them. You fixed yourself. And that made them furious. Because if healing is possible, then what's their excuse? They didn't want your help. They wanted your chaos. Because then they could feel in control. Then they could say, "See, they're no better than me." But when you didn't give them that, they spiraled. They created drama, staged problems, whispered lies. They tried to shake your foundation, but the universe already cemented it. You didn't just have peace, you had proof that peace was real. And they hated that. Because peace means accountability. Peace means change. Peace means no more blaming everyone else for the life you refuse to change. And so they broke themselves, trying to break you. Tore themselves up, trying to poke holes in something that was never built on ego to begin with. They exhausted themselves creating storms, and you just walked through them like weather doesn't apply to the chosen. Here's the thing. They didn't want you calm. They wanted you controllable. And when they realized they couldn't shake you, they started to shake. You never raised your voice. You raised the standard. You didn't fight them. You outgrew them. And yes, it made them uncomfortable. Because you were everything they said healing couldn't look like. You were too quiet to be fake. Too strong to be pretending. Too at peace to be bluffing. And they couldn't stand it. You want to know why they attacked, why they whispered, why they stirred conflict where there was none. Because people who are drowning in chaos can't stand watching someone who learned how to swim. You weren't afraid of their waves. You became the tide. Let them talk. Let them spiral. Let them sit in the rooms where your name gets brought up like a curse they can't shake. Because while they're still caught in the storm, you're building in silence. While they chase reactions, you're chasing purpose. While they create mess, you're creating legacy. Peace is not passive. Peace is not boring. Peace is not weakness. Peace is a throne. And not everyone can sit next to royalty. So stop second-guessing your stillness. Stop wondering if you should have reacted. Stop letting their noise make you question your silence. You were the calm in the middle of their chaos. And that's why they tried to burn you. But fire doesn't scare the sun. And you, chosen one, were never meant to play in their storm. You were born to silence it. Number 6. They tore down the bridge and then cried for rescue. How the ones who needed you most tried to destroy you. Some people won't let you save them, not because they don't need saving, but because they'd rather drown than admit you could pull them from the water. Here's a bitter truth. Chosen one. They destroyed what they secretly needed. Not because you were harmful, not because you failed them, but because your very existence made them confront everything they didn't want to see in themselves. You were the spark, the light, the living, breathing reminder that life could be more. And for a moment, they felt it. Hope, possibility, expansion. But instead of leaning in, they panicked. You lit up the room and they felt exposed. You spoke vision and they felt called out. You embodied healing, and they saw the cost of staying broken. You weren't just an inspiration. You were an interruption of their patterns, their pity, their comfortable misery. They admired you, yes, but they also resented you, fiercely. Because nothing stings more than watching someone live the freedom you told yourself didn't exist. You were their proof. And their proof became their pain. They didn't want to need you. They didn't want to rely on you for direction, guidance, or even presence. Because to them, needing you meant you had something they didn't. And that bruised their pride. And pride will choose destruction over growth every time. They needed your clarity, but mocked your insight. They needed your peace, but called it fake. They needed your strength, but tried to break it down in whispers and doubt. Why? Because admitting they needed you would mean admitting you were ahead. And people stuck in cycles hate the idea that someone broke free and kept walking. So what did they do instead? They started a war, not with fists, but with slander, silence, sabotage. They questioned your character. They downplayed your impact. They tried to poke holes in your authenticity, because if they could find a crack, they wouldn't have to face their reflection in you anymore. But the truth is, they didn't hate you. They hated what they saw in themselves whenever you were near. You were a battlefield, not because you brought chaos, but because your presence ignited a war they were already losing internally. See, you showed them the version of life they could have had. The healed version. The courageous version, the self-respecting, purpose-driven, bold version. But that version required work, sacrifice, accountability, and they weren't ready for any of it. So instead, they attacked the messenger. They hated that they needed you, and so they decided to punish you for it. The logic? Twisted. The damage? Real. And the worst part, they'll still miss you in silence. They'll scroll your pages. They'll replay your words. They'll whisper your name in conversations that start with, you know, they weren't all that bad. But they can't say what really happened. Because what really happened is this. They destroyed the one thing that made them believe in more. You were the torch in their tunnel. And they blew it out just to prove they didn't need light. But darkness doesn't lie. And now they sit in it, heavy, haunted, hurting. You moved on. You had to. Because trying to help people who would rather kill the cure than swallow it, that's not your calling. You were never meant to drag them out. You were meant to wake them up. And if they chose sleep over awakening, that's their burden to carry. So let them call you cold. Let them paint you as the villain. Let them pretend you were the problem, because that's easier than facing the truth. But know this, the ones who try to destroy you often do so because they secretly believe you hold the power to save them. And that truth is too heavy for most to admit. You were never too much. You were too real. And real is rare. Real is scary. Real demands action. They weren't ready to rise, so they tried to pull you down. They failed. And now they're left with a ghost of the person they couldn't appreciate in the flesh. Don't go back. Don't shrink. Don't apologize for the fire you carry. Because if they couldn't handle the warmth, they had no business dancing near the flame. Let them sit with what they destroyed. And you keep building, keep shining, Keep walking like the whole universe stands behind you, because it does. Number 7. You didn't humiliate them. Their own reflection did the damage. You weren't the villain. You were the flashlight in a room they swore was safe in the dark. Let's be clear. Their attacks were never about your flaws. That was just the excuse, the distraction, the decoy. The real issue: your light, your authenticity, your refusal to wear masks just to make others feel safe in their illusions. You didn't expose them with words. Your existence did. Your freedom made their denial uncomfortable. Your healed wounds made their open ones impossible to ignore. They had built entire identities around pretending to be okay, pretending to have moved on, pretending their way of life was enough. Then you showed up, raw, real, whole, and suddenly the cracks in their mask were too loud to silence. So, what did they do? They flipped the script. They exaggerated your flaws, twisted your words, mocked your confidence. Because tearing you down was easier than tearing down their own facade. They didn't fear your mistakes. They feared your freedom. Because when someone chooses healing, they break the unspoken pact of mutual dysfunction. And in doing that, you made yourself a threat. You didn't embarrass them. Their reflection in your light did. And instead of facing it, they ran from it. Not because you were too much, but because you were real in a world that feeds on fake. Keep shining. Because every time they try to dim you, they're just proving how blinding your light really is. Number 8. They didn't misread you. They saw you too clearly, and that was the problem. They didn't walk away because you were confusing. They left because understanding you meant confronting every truth they were avoiding. Let's kill the lie right now. They didn't misunderstand you. They understood you perfectly, and that's exactly why they pulled away. You weren't complicated. You were clear. Your words had weight. Your boundaries had teeth. Your energy spoke louder than explanations ever could. You didn't leave room for confusion. You were the blueprint of someone who did the work, who chose healing over hiding, growth over guilt. And the second they looked at you, they saw the mirror, the one that showed them exactly where they gave up, held back, settled. Your life became proof of what's possible when fear doesn't run the show. And that truth, that burned them. It's easier to pretend someone is too much than admit they've just grown beyond your level of courage. It's easier to create distance than to admit closeness would force change. They weren't running from mystery. They were running from conviction, from what your presence revealed about them. Because the truth is, you reminded them of the version of themselves they abandoned. You reminded them of who they could have been. And that reality is more terrifying than any rejection. So no, you weren't too loud, too deep, too complex. You were too honest, and they were too scared to look that honesty in the face. Let them go, because they didn't reject confusion. They rejected clarity. And that's a battle they'll have to face without you. Number 9. When ego can't handle love, it turns you into the enemy. Some people don't hate you. They just loved you in silence until their pride turned that silence into poison. This wasn't confusion. It was ego. They didn't misunderstand their feelings. They buried them. Because real love requires vulnerability, surrender, humility, And those are things their pride simply couldn't survive. They loved you, yes, deeply, but the kind of love that strips ego bare, that demands accountability and openness. They weren't ready for that. So instead of confessing it, they killed it. They smothered the admiration until it turned bitter. They swallowed the longing until it curdled into resentment. Buried love never stays buried. It rots, it mutates, and when it came back to the surface, it came back as hate, not because you hurt them, but because they couldn't stand how much they needed you. They mistook needing you for weakness, and instead of facing that truth, they made you the villain. You became the object of their projections, the target of their deflections, because admitting they loved you would have meant losing control, and to them that felt like defeat. So they threw stones instead of giving flowers. They built walls instead of bridges, because hatred, no matter how painful, still gave them the illusion of power. But the truth remains, they never stopped wanting you. They just didn't know how to love you without feeling small beside you. You didn't ask for their control, just their honesty. But their ego couldn't survive that ask. So now they hate what they once hoped for. And you walk away knowing that their war was never really with you. It was with the love they were too scared to own. Number 10. You didn't start the war. You just made it impossible for them to keep hiding it. The clash wasn't chaos. It was clarity. And when truth finally spoke, it sounded like thunder. They didn't lose you in the argument. They lost themselves long before that. The moment they started pretending they didn't care, the war had already begun. Because you weren't the problem. You were the mirror. That fight, that fallout, that sudden tension out of nowhere, that wasn't the cause. It was the symptom. The real battle was always internal. They were at war with feelings they never wanted to admit, not just about you, but about themselves. Your presence stirred something real in them, something raw, vulnerable, human, and they hated that, because to care is to risk. To love is to lose control. To connect is to confront the walls you've built around your own heart. So when the clash came, they welcomed it, not because they wanted to end things, but because they didn't know how to face things. They thought cutting you off would make them strong. They thought silence would give them power. But instead, it left a hollow they can't unfeel. In letting you go, they didn't just reject a relationship. They rejected the part of themselves that was brave enough to feel something real. And now, that silence they chose, it's louder than the fight ever was. Because deep down, they know, you weren't the explosion. You were the truth bomb. You exposed the lies they told themselves to sleep better at night. You revealed the fears they dressed up as indifference, and they'll sit with that long after your name leaves their mouth. Because it wasn't about losing you, it was about losing the chance to finally become whole. And now, if you've made it this far, you already know the truth. This was never about what they did to you. It was about what you awakened in them. You didn't break the peace. You exposed the war they were hiding. So hold your head high, chosen one. You weren't too much. You were just the wake-up call they weren't ready for. If this message hit home, like the video, subscribe for more, and drop the number 77 in the comments to let the world know you're standing in your power. Share this with another chosen one who needs the truth.